Good afternoon guys, Mac here. One of the things that comes up a lot in my YouTube comments are things around my internet connection. People notice that I have a very fast home internet, and this is true, I do. I'm fortunate to live in an area that has gigabit internet connectivity, so that's up and down. It's provided for by a company called HyperOptic, and it's incredibly good value for money. I think it cost me around the £50 to £60 a month mark or something like that. To give you an idea, previously I had a 300 megabit up and down service, a business service. It was costing me in the region of £400 a month. So once I saw this option pop up, I jumped all over it. And as you can see, the performance from it is pretty spectacular. Now, just to be clear, it's Friday afternoon, so my backups are running, so normally it runs a little bit faster than this, but I thought I'd show you what effect or what impact it has having an internet connection like this, because it really does change how you work. So I work in the tech arena, so I spend half my life moving things like virtual machines or a lot of VMware type stuff, or even things like PST files around, and even things like YouTube videos. So let me show you here, for example, how long it takes me to upload a YouTube video. So this is one that I've done earlier. It's 1.7 gigabytes. So let's just drop that and we'll see how long it takes to upload to YouTube. In the top right there, you can actually see the network throughput. It kind of goes up to about 90 megabytes a second. There you go. So taking that sort of time to upload a couple of gig video, it's fantastic, and it does make my life a lot easier. So to give you another example, I'll get rid of that. So let's have a look at downloading a Windows 10 ISO. So I'm going to download the 64-bit version. I have to be quick to show you it. Let's go to the downloads. There you go. You can see it's downloading the 4.7 gig ISO image in under a minute, which it's spectacular, and it makes my life a lot easier. If you imagine that previously I'd have to spend a lot of time driving to places to simply get access to things like data centers to copy up things like virtual machines, rarely have to do that now because I kick it off from home and just leave it running. There we go, that's all done. Now, the other thing you might be familiar with, certainly people in the Office 365 or the cloud type environments, are things like Azure Copy. So if I just jump across to my Windows machine, I'll show you what I mean here. I have, let me have a look, an Outlook PST that's just under a gig in size. So let's copy that up to Azure. You can have a look and see how long that takes. Not long at all, 14 seconds. Now, as you can imagine, that is incredibly useful, especially if you're doing things like PST migrations or Exchange migrations. It really does change how you can do it and how much data you can actually move around. I use that a lot for things like copying up to my file stores within Azure, for example. I simply forget that this stuff is miles away in somebody else's data center, and it just feels like local storage. It feels like I'm downloading stuff off my NAS. We can also have a look at the online speed tests as well. So for example, this one here by DSL Reports. Let's let this run, it won't take very long. There we go, it's all done. Like I say, the performance you get from this is pretty spectacular. Now I have to give a bit of a shout out to HyperOptic, because I was a bit nervous about getting their service because I rely on my internet connection because I need it for work. Now previously I used to have my business service, but I also had an ADSL line just in case. I no longer have those because this HyperOptic service has been rock solid ever since I got it, which was probably about 2.5 years ago. I've not had a single outage with it. Now, when I first got it, I had some challenges getting things like VPNs and some of the media stuff that I did. I was having a few oddities in behavior, but what I managed to nail that down to is I'm guessing they must be using carrier grade NAT. Now, I resolved that by having them allocate some static IP addresses for me, and that's just solved the problem. I've not had a single issue since then. Now, of course, part of the challenges then is getting your infrastructure up to the point that it suits the internet connection that you have. So the default router that they give you isn't great for Wi-Fi. you don't get anything like the throughput. So I've invested in a far better router. I've also made a point of my main machines now are wired, and I've also used things like link aggregation, because if you've got a gig internet connection, and say for example I'm copying something up to my NAS, and that's going on up at say 100 megabytes per second, well then I can't copy stuff up to the internet at that sort of rate, because I've only got one gig link to my machine. So what I've ended up doing is putting multiple connections to my iMac Pro in this instance, so I can have multiple aggregated channels, which it doesn't give you above 1 gig in performance, but what it does do is gives you a wider path. So I can have 100 megabytes per second stuff copying up to my NAS, while at the same time be copying up at that sort of rate to my Azure storage, for example. So it just removes that bottleneck. And now there's a lot of misinformation out there about link aggregation, so I might do another video on that, because I think it's a bit misunderstood. There's various ways of doing it, and it does kind of improve your network performance. Anyway, like I say, I've had a lot of comment about my internet connection, so I thought I'd give you a quick run through and show you what it's like. Like I say, a bit of a shout out to HyperOptic. Their service has been amazing. Now, that this is not sponsored by HyperOptic, honest, but guys, if you're listening, I'm very open. Anyway, just a quick point, by the way. This is terminated as an Ethernet connection actually in my hallway. It's far easier to work with than my previous connection. My previous one was a fiber connection, which was a bit of a challenge to get installed, because the guys that turned up to do it were not used to working in a house, so more used to businesses. And of course it meant I had to have the right equipment at home. Well, with this being Ethernet, it goes straight into most routers and off you go. Anyway, I'm all done. Very quick video. If you have any questions on it, I'm more than happy to answer them. Fire them over and I'll see what I can do for you.